Hello, welcome to Inside the Birds pregame live, presented by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It is the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside my co-host Adam Caplan, and we are going to give you the best breakdown there ever it could be of tonight's Eagles game against the Minnesota Vikings. Why is it going to be the best breakdown that it can be, that you can get anywhere? Because we've got the two best breakdown guys in the business. We have former Eagles wide receiver Jason Avant, and of course, we've got Greg Cosell from NFL Films, and of course, the host or co-host, I should say, host, whatever you want to call it, of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. You do everything, Greg. I'm running out of titles for you.
I do way too much, Jeff. You know, sleep is not really part of my daily or weekly routine, unfortunately. Or not a lot of it, not as much as I would like.
All that praise was deserved because we have Greg.
You just do out of your own generosity. So we really appreciate it. Guys, this sort of feels like deja vu for me. And I think for a lot of Eagles fans and maybe even Vikings fans, because here we are, the Philadelphia Eagles getting ready for a week 2 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings on prime time, opening up the link after they kind of got a scary, week 1 win. Last year, it was the Detroit Lions. Last week, it was the New England Patriots. The Eagles win 25-20. Now they come home. They open up the link. Jason, the link is rocking tonight, right? I imagine that you're feeling it from there.
Insane.
Absolutely.
Caplan was down there at 4:30 this morning tailgating.
I saw that. There was some guy.
Yeah.
It wasn't you, Adam?
No, those days are over. Those booths are over. Anyway.
I bet. All right, well, the Vikings last in their season opener against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday, they lost 20-17, which is kind of a strange score given the fact that they had 369 offensive yards. So it makes for an interesting matchup tonight. There's a lot to discuss. We've got major injuries. We're going to break it all down over the next 2 hours here. So while you're enjoying the show on whatever platform you're watching it on, please give us a like. Please recommend it to your friend, your neighbor, your family. Share it if you can. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button for us. We greatly appreciate it. And if you got a chat box there, you can leave a question that we will try to answer. And you can also leave your score prediction, and we will try to get to it for the show. Obviously, it's a short turnaround game. Both teams going right into it here. So we've got a lot to discuss from an X's and O's standpoint. I would like to, as always, start off with a big picture standpoint. Jason, I want to ask you, because you were the first to mention last show that, and I believe I asked you the question in this segment about newness on defense and guys getting used to each other. When you saw what happened, which we saw a lot of in the season opener, are you a win is a win type of guy, or do you come out of that game and you got some notes saying, I'm a little bit concerned about this, that, and the other?
A win is a win. So you're always happy with the win. I'm a little bit concerned because you get 2 of the same type of defensive coordinators the first 2 weeks of the season, and one guy that's a disciple of the other guy, and the first guy had success, and Jalen Hurts was confused. And I didn't see Jalen Hurts confused in 2022-23 season that often. But this year, this game reminded me of the year prior to his stellar year. So I'm concerned about that going forward.
Okay, so I asked you if you were one or the other, and you basically said I'm both.
I'm both.
A win is a win, but I am a little bit concerned. Obviously,
concerned.
Of course, we will definitely get into Jalen Hurts pretty soon here in the show. Greg, what was your big picture takeaway just in general from the game?
It's a great question because I never know exactly how to take week 1 in the NFL, because there's always 3 or 4 games that are weird. But yet you still have to look at the tape and say what you see. Now, I imagine most people listening would think that, there's the Eagles offense tonight will be right back to being great. I'm sure that would be the feeling of many fans. The tape would suggest otherwise, and particularly it's a short week. I would echo what Jay just said. I was really surprised at the misreads by Jalen Hurts, by what he missed. And when I say missed, I don't mean with inaccurate throws, by what he missed based on the routes versus a coverage where the throw was clearly defined and he didn't throw it for whatever reason. Only he could tell you that. So again, is that a function? And there's no defense because it's a regular season game. It's just a reason. Is the reason because he didn't play in the preseason? And this was almost like his starting point? Or is this something that we won't know until tonight that we need to be concerned about? It's impossible to know. I can only tell you what the tape showed, and Jason was responding to that as well.
Yeah, no, it's great points. And I'm glad you sort of brought that up as far as tonight and what we get to learn, because my question for Adam would be, how telltale, Adam, do you think tonight's game will be? It's short turnaround. You don't necessarily, you do what you do more so than maybe if you have a longer week or a Monday night game. You get week one, this will be week two. How telltale in general for the season do you think this will be?
Well, I would say, based on our conversations with people, we also talked to John DeFilippo, the former Eagles quarterbacks coach, who actually watched the Eagles offensive tape for us. He said, look, it was hard. Last week was hard. John's gone against that defense as an offense coordinator. They're going to throw stuff at you, most likely you haven't seen before. If you've seen it, maybe coached a different way or displayed a different way, and he had to hold on the ball a little bit longer than they probably wanted him to, and didn't get rid of it sometimes. And it was just different. It was a difficult matchup. They're not going to face anything like that. Now, I say that Brian Flores is going to run his version of Belichick's defense. No defense is ever called the same way. But guess what? The personnel's not great on Minnesota. I feel strongly they're going to bounce back in a pretty big way at home. Protection, I expect to be better. If you look at Minnesota's defensive personnel, it's just not great. The Eagles should bounce back. Look, yes, they got to play the game out. But to answer your question, I think things are going to be completely different for this football team. Now, defensively, though, that's where I get concerned due to the injuries, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, guys, I wanted to share with you my takeaway in that I think it's just a natural part of what we do, breaking down offense and defense, that sometimes we don't talk about special teams unless it's a real problem, right? And my takeaway from that game that I'd like to share with you guys is that the Eagles, we don't talk really enough about how good Jake Elliott has become. I know he missed an extra point wide right, and he went through a couple of struggles about 2 years ago. They obviously changed the process, brought in a different punter who we probably talk about more than the kicker. But Jake Elliott might be coming into his own as one of the better kickers in the NFL. I don't know if that's discussed a lot outside of Philadelphia. I know there's Justin Tucker, and he's in a level unto himself, but Jake Elliott was the hero for the Eagles, and at least one of them in week one. And Jason, I don't know if you despise me for giving a kicker that much credit as a football player, wide receiver. But I really do think we have to mention him now as one of these ascending kickers in the league who's starting to enter that upper echelon. Agree?
Well, he's played. He did really well this past game, and he's put together a good 2-year run. He had some struggles before then where there was talks of him being replaced and of that nature, but he's definitely doing a great job these last 2 years, and hopefully he can continue to go, but Justin Tucker, it's a little different.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's
I'm
like
not ready.
automatic.
I'm not there yet, but those were not great conditions that he had to kick in last week. And I was pretty impressed. And clearly the Eagles played at one point for him to kick a long field goal that he made. So big time effort by him, Jake Elliott. Let us talk about the injury.
Justin.
I thought I said Justin Elliott accidentally. So it was you? Okay. It was in my head.
No, you're fine.
All right, let's get into the injuries, because obviously they're going to play a major part in this game. We'll start with the Eagles, and they came out of that game pretty banged up on offense. The guy we talked about, Kenny Gainwell, getting all those carries, well, he's not going to have that opportunity tonight. He is out with a rib injury. So it looks like, and we'll have to wait for the inactives to come out, but you would imagine that Rashad Penny would be active tonight. I imagine that he will be, and maybe a bigger role for DeAndre Swift. We just have to wait and see. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And defensively, you got Fletcher Cox, who is questionable with ribs, but 3 starters out. Nakobe Dean with the foot injury. He's going to be out for about a month. James Bradbury in the concussion protocol, and Reed Blankenship ruled out with a rib injury. Adam, that's you're talking about on the defense, which was inconsistent last week. If you were to pick 3 players that you thought played fairly well, certainly Nakobe Dean and run support and Reed Blankenship, and of course James Bradbury is fairly steady. That's tough for this team right now.
Yeah, and that's why Flip said if he happened to be coaching, he would come out throwing, knowing that the best safety is out. Their number 2 corner, who was a Pro Bowler and a second-team All-Pro last year in Bradbury. Dean, their best inside linebacker. 3 defensive starters and your back 7. That's impactful. So conditions would really be favorable tonight based on the weather. It looks great tonight. So yeah, they should come out. The Vikings, if they could protect Cousins, should come out throwing. Now, if you look at these injuries, we were told that, look, there was initial concern with Dean's injury that it was a Lift Frank injury. Thank God it's not, which obviously could be, even if it's a mild Lift Frank, it would be more than 4 weeks, but we're told it's just a sprained foot. The hope is, as you reported earlier this week, that it's only 4 weeks. And on short-term IR, you have to miss at least 4 games. So the hope is that he works in the 5th game and the 5th week, and he can come back that week. But the fact of the matter is now they're down to 3 inside linebackers. By the way, they did not elevate Ben Van Sumeren off of the practice squad. They don't have a running back on the practice squad, so Penny will definitely be up tonight. To have at least 3 running backs up, you got to do that. So look, Gainwell, we could all criticize him for starting Gainwell. He's not explosive and all that, but now you've got Penny up, who we're told was very ordinary in training camp. The one game he was in preseason, we're told the tape was very average, but Swift has got to get the ball. We all know that. That was a misusage of him last week, Jeff. Covey's up today, by the way, as the receiver by the punt returner. There are going to be opportunities tonight to be more explosive, but the big issue is, as you mentioned, the injuries. Are the 3 starters who are out tonight? I'm so fascinated to see how Kevin O'Connell comes out here. Does he come out throwing, which he really should be?
Yeah, no, I think the matchups are going to be fascinating. You mentioned Britton Covey elevated, Aaron Siposs elevated, so they have their punter and their punt returner. This would be the 2nd time in 5 days now, right, that both are elevated. So each one only has 1 elevation left. Rashaan Evans, by the way, signed to the practice squad this week. Greg, real quick on Rashaan Evans. I know people get excited he's a former 1st-round pick. I always say yes, but he didn't get a 2nd contract with the team that picked him. He was with Atlanta last year. He was on the street. He's on the practice squad. What do you your tape study tell you about Rashaan?
Yeah, one
Evans?
of those guys. I remember him coming out of Alabama. He actually went to Alabama as an edge pass rusher. That's what he was in high school. They made him a stack backer. Very, very athletic kid. Had some good years in Tennessee. Then a move to Atlanta. A guy that to me always struck me as just not as good a player as his physical and athletic traits. Now he's basically a stacked linebacker. That's what he's been in his NFL career. And as you guys know, they tend not to be in demand unless they're truly special. So he's obviously was out there. We'll see what happens. I mean, the guy is an athlete, always has been a really, really good athlete. Like, it's funny how you can talk about being an athlete versus being a football player. He's a far better athlete than TJ Edwards, but not as good a football player.
There you go. All right. And a little minor move. The Eagles did waive off the injured reserve Charleston Rambo earlier this week. He was a wide receiver that was with them in camp. We'll talk about Vikings injuries right now because they're pretty banged up as well. And that's obviously going to determine how this game goes tonight. On IR for them is a defensive tackle, James Lynch. He had an ACL injury. Adam, he was going to be a starter for them this year in the inside of their D-line. Yeah,
and they run a 34. They by the way, they are very light at D tackle. That's a problem for them. That's another area I think the Eagles could take advantage of it. Garrett Bradbury, their starting center, is out. It's a little bit of a smaller guy. Aaron Schlottman, who used to be with Denver, who's a guard center. I remember him as a center in college. He'll start tonight for them. And Christian Darrisaw did participate in the walkthrough yesterday. Now he's a game time decision. Man, if he can't play tonight, Udo, who's a kid who's a backup right tackle or left, would fill in. They're another team. You saw what happened, Jeff, last week. The Patriots started 3 backups of the offensive line, and boy, did it show.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're out your starting center, and if Christian Darrisaw, who, Greg, I know you like him as an ascending left tackle in this league, correct?
I do.
Yeah, if he can't play, forget about it. I don't know how the Vikings
Well,
are
that's
going to be
why
able
it's
to
funny,
function.
you talked about coming out throwing. You have to think about that because you don't have a pass game if you can't protect. So you can talk about throwing all you want and about trying to attack what we perceive to be a weakness in the Eagles secondary, and maybe they can exploit it. But if you can't protect, particularly with a quarterback who's not going to make second reaction plays, then you don't have a passing game.
Oh, absolutely. All right. And obviously on the other end of that, Marcus Davenport, an edge rusher, used to be a first-round pick of the Saints, is questionable with an ankle. Now, he did not play last week, if I'm not mistaken. So he's trying to make it back tonight to play in the season opener. So we'll see if he'll be able to make it. Obviously, the Vikings could use him. He's a decent pass rusher when you can get him out on the field. All right, let us talk again. Remember, if you have a chance to retweet this show or share this show, we really appreciate it. Leave your score prediction, leave your comments or questions in the chat box. Let's talk about the game. As we mentioned, the second time in as many years that the Eagles and Vikings are meeting on week 2 at the Link, prime time. Now, last year, guys, you guys remember, this was the Jalen Hurts coming out party. 26 of 31 for 333 yards and a touchdown. Also ran for 57 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, a 108.7 passer rating. Look, we all know that year, that Vikings defense, totally different than the one they're going to see tonight, and we will get into that. But I do want to go through Jalen Hurts' performance last week against the Patriots because, as you guys mentioned, similar perhaps scheme coordinator. We'll get into that. But Greg, you mentioned some of the things you saw from Jalen that surprised you. Was it we talk about the term seeing a clear picture, right? Did you feel that for whatever reason, whether it was what the defense was doing, the elements, anything, that Jalen didn't see the picture the way he had most times last year?
You know, it's funny. I watching that tape, Jeff, you know, we all know that Bill Belichick's a great coach, but I didn't feel like that was the issue per se. Mm-hmm. You know, I thought he was very quick to break down in the pocket through early possessions. He did not show the needed patience in the pocket that he, you know, clearly showed a lot more of a year ago. I thought that there were throws that he just, for whatever reason, did not see. I mean, like there was a play on the first play of the fourth quarter, and this is when the game was close, where he had Goddard wide open on the crosser versus a Patriots 3-under-3 deep zone. And it was a deep sail cross combination. It's in everybody's playbook. And he threw it to Brown. And the ball should have been thrown to Goddard. Then he missed Smith on a wide open seam route. It was 4 verticals versus cover 3. 4 verticals is a cover 3 beater. And Smith was wide open on the left on the inside vertical. And, you know, you basically, the way, and Jay can speak to this, the way that's taught is you work seam to seam based on the post safety. It's really a one-read concept that can't get any more basic, and he just didn't see it. And I can't tell you why he didn't see it, but these are the things we did not see a year ago. And again, we can debate why. We can say, oh, it's Bill Belichick, which I don't believe it was, or you can say it's the first game of the season, but we just didn't see these kinds of things a year ago.
Jay, what was your thought watching?
Well, there's a few things, and you got to give him the benefit of the doubt. And let's say that, like Greg mentioned, right? Let's say that this is the first preseason game for him and knocking off Russ. But I want you guys to understand something too about elements. When it's raining profusely like it was in that first quarter, it kind of handicaps your offense. You saw the Patriots try to full steam ahead, get 2 turnovers really quickly. That goes into the mind of the offensive coordinator, and he disseminates that information to the quarterback, which brings in that type of shy, mentality, that timid approach to the rain. And so now they're doing more of a ball controlled offense rather than letting loose. And I felt like that was part of the problem, but that doesn't cause you to miss like blatant reads and not understanding where blitz is coming from, like the Christian Gonzalez sack. Yeah, it's clearly zone coverage. This guy is in a weird position looking at the receiver. You know that he's coming. Like, that's something that you just see. And he didn't see it until the very end, until he was about to get sacked. Like little things like that. And I think Tony Romo said it really well in the broadcast. That first quarter, 0 zone it off coverage, I felt like that was the tone setter for the rest of the game, because it caused Jalen to be more defensive and more unsure about what he was looking at. Then this is just my perception of it. I can't tell you what was in Jalen's brain, but to me, looking at the tape, I think it was one of those things that caused him to just second guess what he was looking at for the rest of the game.
Now, we know the deep ball was a big part of what they did last year. His deep ball accuracy was great. Obviously, the Patriots did some things, especially in the second half, right, to try to keep everything in front. There was one particular play I wanted to ask you guys about. I believe it was a cover one look, and he tried to hit Devontae Smith deep down the left side, and it wound up getting broken up by the safety who came over and closed. Do you guys remember that play? Because it looked from an all-22 standpoint like Devontae was open for a little while, and Jalen was protected in the pocket, but when the ball got there, two guys converged on him. And I just wanted to see if you guys remember that one in particular.
On the left sideline.
Yes.
On the left side.
Almost in front of the end zone, maybe a 5 yard.
It was right in front of it. So he was late getting it up, I believe, on that play. And I think that he got his eyes to the receiver a little bit too soon, where the safety was able to get over there. Right. So, like I said, that could be rust. I wasn't overly concerned about that play. You know, the ones that Greg pointed out, and also just the double coverage. I'm going to just heave it to AJ Brown when there's a streaking Dallas Goedert right across the field that's going to gain the same. AJ Brown could have possibly scored a touchdown, but Dallas is going to be at the 10-yard line anyway. Right. You know, so if you just throw it to him, like little things like that, it was a little frustrating. But like I said, preseason game, it was inclement weather. You know, let's chalk it to that and give the guy that performed all last year the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely. The one thing we know, Adam, is, you know, Jalen Hurts takes his corrections seriously. He'll be the first guy in the building, and he's anything we're saying today is not going to be foreign to him. I'm sure within 24 hours of the game, he knew everything that he didn't do well and could do better. I want to ask you in particular about Goedert, because as they mentioned, he was open. He did not get a catch in the entire game and only one target. Now, that was a similar conversation we were having last year at this time about Devontae Smith. And then you saw Smith explode, right, in week 2 and week 3. Are you expecting that the coaches will, and Jalen Hurts himself will make sure that Dallas Goedert in some form or fashion is fed the ball tonight?
Well, let's put it this way. I think the matchups will favor him. You have a 34-year-old safety in Harrison Smith. This is just not the most talented team. And by the way, last year he had a really good game. In fact, he led the Eagles in receiving, 5 for 82. He had the second longest play of 24 yards. There are plays to be made against this defense. Now, I know it's different than Ed Donatell's, completely different in terms of philosophy and the way they scheme it up, but the personnel is quite the same. It's very similar. I expect them to come out throwing in this game because the Eagles are healthy on the offensive line where the Vikings are not. And we'll get to something, couple nuggets on their offensive line and their philosophy later. But yeah, to answer your question, I expect Goedert to get the ball just because I think also the matchups really favor them. And the other thing is, how do they come out? Are they going to spread them out and go 11? Are they going to go 12? Could they do both? Yes. Eagles like to do both. They like to go from 12 to 11. And look, the Vikings, by the way, are also not good at corner again. That's another position. They've had all sorts of problems at the cornerback position for years.
Yeah. Can I say something just to, go behind Adam there? Part of my reasoning of Jalen Hurts and the way that he played in comparison to not last year, but the year before, is because one of the critiques going into last year's season was Jalen Hurts was unable to connect over the middle. And what's the underlying reason for that? When you're unsure about what you're seeing, you're a little bit apprehensive about throwing it over the middle. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you have 20 targets to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith outside the numbers where you can see, and you don't have to read as much inside. And Dallas Goedert gets one target, and the target that he gets is toward the sideline where he can see. So therefore, that's what's kind of telling me, along with the information that I saw on film, that it was a little bit tough for him, and Bill Belichick did his job very well this past game.
Sure. And by the way, on that note, the last time Dallas Goedert played in a game and didn't have at least one catch, you'd have to go back to September 22nd, 2019 against the Lions. That's almost 3 years ago that he's gone. That was a streak of 51 straight games that Goddard has played that had a catch that got snapped. So listen, I know how much you love the tight end screen to Dallas Goedert. And I'm wondering if we're going to see that again pretty soon, because he is one of their best screen weapons. And this is an aggressive defense.
He should have got it the first play of the second half. When you go to the stat line right there, I remember Marty Morningwig would know the stat line. Hey, we got to get Jason a catch. Hey, we got to go get this guy a catch. That's how it happens. You know, go out and give a guy a little grease. Give him something to keep him motivated.
So he knows. So your OC knew the numbers. Okay,
yeah.
That's interesting. Okay,
Expect like if it was Quez Watkins, and I'm not saying anything bad about Quez, but if it's like one of your starting players, like there's no way Deshaun Jackson's going to go a whole game without getting targets. It's just not. Even if we have to go and like him stand next to the quarterback and just pitch it forward, he gonna get a catch.
Listen, I remember Marty Morningweg at Lehigh having a press conference telling reporters that backup quarterback Jeff Garcia was something like 18 of 20 in 7-on-7s on a Monday and a Tuesday. So it doesn't shock me at all that in a real game at halftime, he's well aware of who has all the targets.
That's how Marty would motivate. Like if your team wasn't doing well, say you had a 5 and you were 5-7 or something like that, and maybe you're outside of the playoffs. He'll start making it individual. Hey, buddy, like you had 30 catches last year. You got 27. I need you to get those this game. Like he tried to motivate you other ways.
I have a question on that, Jason. Do you think Nick Sirianni should have tapped Brian Johnson on the shoulder and said, hey, see Agent Zero over there, Rashad Penny? No, excuse me, DeAndre Swift? The guy we made a trade for? Get him the football. Because I don't know what was going on with that last week.
Yeah. Those are things that the head coach is responsible for doing. Remember, everything falls on the head coach. So if you want a guy to touch the ball, he has that right. Coach Reed can always veto into the offense coordinator and say, hey, let's run this play. He has the final say so, and especially Nick Sirianni being an offensive guy. But yeah, you want to see Swift get more touches, and he'll get him this night for sure because of Gainwell's out. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Let's have a discussion about that. I think most people were very surprised that Rashad Penny was not active in the game. And then also on top of that DeAndre Swift got 19 total snaps, just snaps, compared to the 41 for Kenneth Gainwell. Swift was out there, but he only got 1 carry and he was only targeted once. So Adam, what was more of a surprise to you, that Swift was not really involved as much in the game plan? Because I remember you thinking, come out throwing, come out getting the ball to DeAndre Swift. Or were you even more surprised that Rashad Penny wasn't even dressed?
I'm probably that Swift didn't get the ball. I understand from a special team standpoint, you're probably not going to dress 4 backs most weeks. But here's what caught them. When they needed to grind carries out, that Gainwell, as good as he's been as a short yardage back, he's not explosive. Coaches will tell you, as they've told you and I, Jeff, since we started the show 6 years ago, it's about explosive plays and not giving up explosive plays. Gainwell has 2 plays of over 20 yards in his career. This is just not this fascination this coaching staff has with Gainwell. Look, it's not happening. Get someone else in there who has explosiveness. Now, Penny, we're told, was not super explosive in training camp. The limited preseason tape, he looked very ordinary, we're told. So, okay, I get that. But he's going to play tonight. They only have 3 backs left. He's got to play. Swift, outside formation, is fantastic. They have no one else on the roster like him. This has got to be the night that these backs show what they can do. And I'd be very disappointed if we don't see explosive plays tonight.
Jay, I keep coming back to this, and Greg, I'll bring you in as well. And listen, I don't pretend to be a GM, a coach. Adam and I have, pretty good knowledge of what's going on in the building a lot. But if you're not going to play Rashad Penny at a time at which he's healthy, right, why would he even be on your 53 at that point? Because when he's healthy, he's a guy who averages over 6 yards per carry in his career. It's the highest yards per carry average for a running back in the league since he entered it 5 years ago. So I guess what I'm struggling to figure, and listen, I get that he's had injuries, and maybe they saw something this camp, Jay, that they felt he's not that Rashad Penny. But then that would go back to my point of, well, then why was he even on the 53?
Remember this: when you go through training camp and you go through these inner squad practices and those things, guys outperform one another. And so though you may say DeAndre Swift is the better player, and I may think that based on prior years' tapes and maybe his measurables, or I may think Rashad Penny is the better player and what he did last year in Seattle, right? But if you had a open competition between all three, and Gainwell, based on every coach's eyes, outperform those guys, he's justified. Now, what I will say is that I think that maybe that occurred, and or there's loyalty toward Gainwell, because Gainwell actually propelled the team forward last year in the playoffs. And sometimes you say, this guy knows this. He has the experience. He's been in the offense a few years, and I like the way he's trending, and I don't want to take that away from him, right? So you have that familiarity, and you have that comfortability there. And maybe the other guys wasn't learning the playbook as well as you would like. There are so many different scenarios that we're not privy to, but they believe that Gainwell was better that game.
Greg, you watch 100 running backs a week on tape, right? And Gainwell, you've seen quite a bit of. Last week or Sunday, 14 carries for 54 yards, which is, 3.9 a carry, which by NFL standards, not very good. He caught 4 passes for 20. In total, he averaged 4.1 yards per touch against the Patriots. And you've seen him now for a couple of years. I think what's baffling for Adam and I, and maybe you as well, is that this is a guy who was like a wide receiver in college, right? And usually those guys have explosion. He caught so many balls at Memphis, but he's been, as Adam said, more of a grinder. And we haven't really seen a track record of explosion at the NFL level. When you watch him on tape, do you feel like you see anything other than...
I mean, to me, I think you're being a little harsh. I mean,
okay.
Gainwell is a good back. By the way, Jeff, his last year at Memphis, he also gained, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he gained 1,300 yards rushing. It's not as if he was just a receiver who, gained, 500 yards. Explosive is a relative term. Everybody wants explosion, but I'm not sure exactly what that means. Are we expecting tonight? And look, it could happen on the first play of the game, and then people will call me an idiot, and I've been called worse. But are we expecting that, DeAndre Swift all of a sudden is going to come in? He's going to have 3 50-yard touchdown runs. That doesn't happen in the NFL. Gainwell last year, Jay made a great point. Last year, Gainwell was a really important piece of this offense in the role he was asked to play. There's no one who believes in that building that Gainwell is a feature back in the sense that you're going to give him 20 touches every single week. The other point Jay made that's correct is we're not privy to why they did what they did in that game. Okay, maybe there's something with Swift that we don't know about, but they obviously felt in that particular game, maybe it was weather-based, that Gainwell was the better option. He did carry 6 times on the first series. They ran 13 plays. He carried 6 times, and they got a field goal. I like Gainwell as a back. There's no illusion here that Gainwell is, an unbelievable back. He's not Dalvin Cook in his prime. We know that. But I think he's a better player than you guys are talking about. Now you're getting down to deployment within the context of an offense. It's one game. Let's see how the season plays out with Swift, with Penny. Let's see how it all plays out before we make these definitive judgments about what Gainwell is and isn't, and what DeAndre Swift's deployment will be.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was really looking at it real quick through a career, because I didn't want to just do one game. And I have, I put together the graphic.
But he doesn't have a sample size, Jeff, that's large enough to say this is what he is. It's not like looking at certain backs that are, let's say, quote unquote, feature backs that get 250 carries a year for 3 years. And then we can make a far more informed judgment as to what a guy is or isn't. Gainwell has not had a large enough sample size to either say, wow, this guy's really good, or this guy isn't that, and we should move on. To me, that's the way I look at it.
Well, we don't, Jeff and I are in alignment. We don't see him as a guy they need to move on from. He definitely has morphed into this guy who could handle some carries. Yeah. One of the best true yardage backs in football, which, by the way, they didn't know that at Memphis. We talked to his head coach, Ryan Silverfield, about that. That's not what they saw there. You already talked about what he did in 2019, but he's just not the same. He's not used the same way here as he was in Memphis for whatever reason. Now, we know through coaching, they see what they see and they use him the way they think could best help their football team. But I know talking to coaches, they're looking for 5 yards or more per play from explosive. That's what an explosive is called. We don't see enough of that from Gainwell. I'd like to see it from somebody to get an explosive play here or there. That to me is clearly missing from the backfield.
Yeah, and so just to summarize what you said, Adam, I put together, all three Eagles running backs and their career averages. And I agree with you, Greg, that how do you compare Gainwell's career average to someone who may have 200 more yards, 200 carries more? That's a fair. At the same point, he's also not a rookie. He's had a decent amount of carries in his career. Gainwell averages 4.3 yards per carry, which is okay. 5.3 yards per touch. If you compare that to Swift and Penny, Swift is 4.6 per carry, 5.5 per touch, and Penny 5.7. Now, again, I get the sample size.
I don't want to make this an argument because it's not, but
it's all right. It's fair.
Obviously, Penny did not perform in training camp to the liking of the staff. Because we can go back and look at Penny 2 years ago, but we're not 2 years ago. 2 years ago, in the last 6 games of the season, he had the most yards in the NFL and averaged whatever he averaged, which is probably close to 6 yards a carry. And it seemed like every week he had a 60-yard touchdown run. Obviously the Eagles did not see that back in the preseason, okay?
Right.
Or he would have been active last week.
Okay.
So
that makes sense. Yes.
Here we are on September 14th, and this is what the Eagles see. I think we should give their coaching staff, which I think we would all agree has seemingly done a pretty good job the last couple of years. I think we should let the coaching staff see what they see, which doesn't mean they're going to be right on every decision.
Right.
Hey, you'll hear a lot of coaches say, Jay, you can speak to this absolutely better than I can. You'll hear a lot of coaches say, hey, I'm not sure what we have until we start playing games. Sometimes they just don't know that.
Right.
So I think we have to be careful.
Yeah, no, definitely. And for me, it's the discussion is more about Gainwell Swift, because I agree with you that maybe there was very likely something they saw in camp, as Jason was alluding to, in practice, when it's all about your performance and competition, that they clearly weren't fond of.
Yeah, and also Jay's probably got a great point to make here. So go ahead.
One second, Jay. And I will say that Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson both said, there was some plan to get the ball to Swift. It just didn't always go to him, which goes to your point about where the ball is going against the defense. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I'll just say this to answer your first question is, why are they on a roster? And that's what Howie's designed to do. Howie is trying to create a culture where competition is king. So you're going to get the best available players that's within your financial budget to make the guys around better, and the cream rises to the top. And just because a guy that plays for, Middle Tennessee State has 200 yards receiving doesn't mean that he's going to go to Alabama and have the same success, right? So if you put guys in the same room, no matter what their background is, and Gainwell comes out the winner, you got to go with what you see as a coach.
Fair enough. By the way, Reed Blankenship would like a word with you.
Middle
Tennessee State.
Right.
He hears you. He hears you dissing Middle Tennessee State.
I'm not trying to diss.
I know. I'm just kidding. All right. Good conversation. Really good conversation. And as Greg, I think you hit the point. You hit the head here. Let's see what happens tonight.
Yeah.
And going forward.
We have a ways to go here. We've got 16 more games to go.
Greg is going to kick your butt, Joe.
Let's all go back to let's all go back to our corners.
Talking ball,
right, let's go.
Doesn't mean I'm right. Hey, I've been wrong many times, Jay, believe me. And when I am, I'm told about it. And usually people tell me about it using words that I probably shouldn't say now.
I was just going to say, it's usually not very kind on this.
Yeah, it's usually not very kind.
Yeah,
anti-social
media.
We live in Philly. You can't expect.
There you go. All right, let's all go to our corners now. Get a little water. Get toweled off. We'll take a break and hear from our friends. We'll take a break and hear from our friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, if you happen to stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Jeff sent you. You'll get a great deal. All right. So back into this matchup against the Vikings and their similarities per se that they might have against the team that the Eagles just faced. Now, last year, the Vikings were a two-shell team, soft zone. Their defensive coordinator was Ed Donatel. This year, you got Brian Flores in there, flying Brian Flores. He's ready to bring all sorts of pressure and do all sorts of things that he was known from, or that the Patriots were known from when he was there coaching under Belichick. So, Greg, I will start with this because we all know that your scheme can only be dictated by your personnel. You can't do everything the Patriots do because you don't have the same players all the time as the Patriots, right? But give us an idea based on what you saw last week and what you know of Brian Flores as to what the Eagles offense should expect tonight.
I think there's a lot of ways to go here. And I think that there's no easy answer to that. Because when Brian Flores was in Miami, very often they would line up with 6, 7, 8 men on the defensive front, and they'd pressure, and then, they do a lot of those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
He did not do that last week. Now, again, that could have just been the way he wanted to play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's one game. What he did last week, which he's going to do tonight, it just depends on what degree, is what he showed you before the snap of the ball was not what you got after the snap of the ball. That's the key. And that's what he's really, really good at. Now, we can talk about the players, particularly in their secondary. They play Evans at right corner, in their base anyway. Evans at right corner, Murphy at left corner. In their nickel, and they didn't play many snaps at dime, but in nickel, they would bring Murphy inside and play the rookie Mekhi Blackman from USC, a player whose tape I really, really liked, and I was very happy to see him drafted where he was. But the point is you can say, well, okay, Evans and Blackman are on the outside. We're going to go after them. And they can. They will go after them. You absolutely will. But all I'm saying is that what he did last week, we know he's going to do something like that in a larger schematic way, Jeff, but it won't be exactly the same. Last week, he had so many snaps where he lined up in a double mug front, 2 players on each side of the center, 2 A-gap players. And by the way, he played a ton of big nickel last week with a guy I'm sure Jason's familiar with, Josh Metellus, who played a ton of snaps last week in his 4th year from Michigan. And, because Flores comes from the Belichick school, Metellus might not play tonight. That's the way those guys work. He played him last week and he was an important part of the game plan. But the point I'm trying to make is rarely when they lined up in double mug, did they even pressure. Those guys dropped out. They were really good on 3rd down. They caught Baker Mayfield a number of times. And I know what fans are listening now are saying, well, Jalen's not Baker Mayfield. That's not the point. It's the concept. Right. It's the concept that what you see initially and what you have to deal with initially from a protection standpoint is not the way it plays out. Just to make one final point, there was a 3rd down in the high red zone last week with Baker Mayfield, okay? That's what they did. They lined up in a double mug, and what the Bucs did is they had trips to the right, okay? It was a bunch formation, trips to the right. So what the Bucs did, because they thought they were going to get pressure, particularly in the red zone, is they kept the tight end in and the back in to pass protect. Well, what the Vikings did is everybody went out. It ended up being a 3-man rush. They played box. That's what we call it, box over trips, 4 over 3. And now Baker Mayfield had nowhere to throw the ball. He had nothing on the backside because the tight end was in, the back was in, and he got stuck in the pocket and he got sacked. These are the kinds of things you have to deal with against Brian Flores. So it's a mental game. But yet you have to prepare for the fact that if he's in a 6 or 7-man front, you can't say, oh, well, I don't think he's going to come. You can't do that. You have to have a protection plan for all that.
Well, you know the phrase, it's crazy how much a year changes, right, Jason? Because last year, it wasn't a whole lot of mental calculus that Jalen Hurts needed to figure out where he wanted to go with the ball against that Ed Donatel.
Not at all.
Ed Donatel was very stagnant, very sort of like, so watching the Vikings Bucs game, it kind of made me excited because, you know, watching Jonathan Gannon all last year. And,
I knew this was going to come back. I knew it. I knew it.
It did. It made me excited because you, as a person that watches a lot of football, seeing a guy at the line of scrimmage, you know, and then he's in the middle of the field, they just ran a reverse cover 2 and they blitzed the corner. Like you started to look at it. I was like, it's a lot of these plays. The safety's coming this time. The backside corner's coming this time. Danielle Hunter, the defensive end or outside linebackers dropping in the coverage, right? He's just throwing a bunch of stuff at the quarterback to confuse him. And he did a damn good job of confusing Baker Mayfield at times. In the same way with Belichick, same way with Todd Bowles. Those guys are like Greg said, you think you're seeing something, but it's something totally different. And right. They had a zero look. When you talk about the double mug, they had a zero look and it looked like zero. It's third down. They dropped out, ended up being cover 2.
Yep.
And I'm like, the corner ran from his corner position back to the safety. The safety ran down and covered the corner spot. I was like, this is just good stuff. It was good. Yeah. It was enjoyable.
And one other point I would make is after halftime, he showed a lot of different things that you didn't see in the first half. Wow. So not only that, you know, he comes out with a certain game plan, which is tough in its own way. And I love the way Jay was talking about. What he was talking about was what we call cover 2 invert, where the safety actually comes down and he plays the flat and the corner becomes the deep half player. So it's just an invert. It's cover 2 invert. They did a lot of that, by the way. But what he did in the second half, he had different concepts than what he did in the first half. So, right. You know, and again, the Eagles could win tonight 35-10. This is not the point. The point is we're just talking about what you're going to get from Brian Flores, and it's not an easy defense to play against conceptually.
Yeah, Adam, you would think, Adam, right, that they would sort of welcome maybe a little more pressure because that would leave some pretty good one-on-one scenarios for Hurts and his weapons against that secondary.
Yeah, you had told me, Jeff, a couple months ago, you had heard from a pretty good source that Flores was doing a ton of pre-snap and post-snap stuff in training camp.
Yes.
OTAs.
Yes.
And I guess the person you spoke with was pretty excited, and I'm not saying this person was criticizing his predecessor, Ed Donatell, but I think what we've learned through this discussion is you don't have to have like A-level players to be able to do this. You have to guys who could execute. Mm-hmm. And the mental gymnastics this Belichick system puts on you, it's one thing to be able to protect, but it's another to process what you're seeing. And this is going to be interesting because Greg just talked about he did one thing in the first half, then changed it in the second half. That's fascinating. That's interesting.
And if I could say, too, they also, obviously the corner position, particularly when they're in dime, is a potential issue with, you know, Evans and Blackman on the outside. And even with Murphy and Evans. But they're interesting up front, and Jay can address this as well. They've got a lot of length and athleticism up front. Danielle Hunter we spoke about. DJ Warner is a very interesting player as well from South Carolina, who's now been in the league 3 or 4 years. Another guy that's 6'5" with a length and movement. Patrick Jones, a second-year player from Pitt, 6'5", length and movement. You know, they've got an interesting group of upfront players that, you know, can line up in different spots and be used and deployed in different ways. So, again, we don't know how the game's going to play out. If the Eagles are at the top of their game, like I said, they could win by 25 and, you know, and we'll all be happy and we'll have a different conversation next week. But it's just not an easy defense to play against.
Yeah. One more guy, Jaquelin Roy, Greg. Just want to throw that in there.
Is he going to play tonight?
Well, if he does tonight, because they're a little light on the defensive line, what'd you think of him, 5th round of LSU?
I actually loved his tape. I found out from people that there were some major personality issues, which is why he was a 5th round pick. Yeah. But I actually loved his tape. I thought that he was a D tackle that could play the run, that could rush the quarterback. There was a lot I really, really liked about him. And I saw a ton of LSU, obviously, because they always have so many players. Yeah. I thought he had a desirable combination of traits. He was a plus athlete. He had light feet. He had excellent quickness off the ball. He had confined space strength. I spoke to a GM who really liked him, but in so many words told me he was a you-know-what, you know, so, you know, so, you know,
I got it.
And that's
we
why
say the same about you, Greg.
Round.
So Jaquel and Roy, we'll see if he's active tonight. And then, of course, Greg, to your point, if Marcus Davenport's active, that's just another guy who can come in on the edges.
And he's 6'6". There's a lot of length here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that sort of also goes to your point on what they chose to do last week, and obviously, Brian Flores watches the tape, and he might see, hey, those offensive tackles for the Eagles who get a whole lot of accolades may not have played their best game against the Patriots. I wanted to go ahead and ask you.
I think you can lose the word may.
Yeah, they didn't.
They didn't.
You're right. They didn't play their best game.
I almost fell off my seat, Jeff, when I saw Lane Johnson get beat on a play.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the last time I saw that, I was 5 years old.
What century was that?
110 years ago, Greg?
I had to run to the outhouse. I was so yeah.
But that is surprising. And as someone who watches tape, and Jason, I'll get you on this in a second, but is there any? It's kind of hard to notice when to me, I'm watching it and I just say, wow, he got beaten by an inside swim move. I don't normally see him get beat like that, but I can't tell if it's footwork or handwork or what. Why maybe he just had a bad day.
He actually got beat a couple of times. I mean, beat is a relative term. It's not like he got driven right back into the quarterback and the guy sacked him. But I mean, he was not normally when guys get into Lane Johnson, he just stones him. The rep's over, he just stones him. There are probably 3 or 4 plays last week where that did not happen. And the other thing too is Jordan Mailata did not have a very good game at left tackle. So both tackles did not play well. So again, you get into the conversation, do we expect them to play, both really great football tonight? We'd like that to be the case. We don't know.
Right. Yeah. Jason, that also Jason goes back to the conversation we had in the pregame show last week about the Patriots have some pretty underrated linemen and pass rushers who don't get discussed but are pretty good, and I think you saw that.
Yeah, you definitely saw that, and I'll say that there's a lot of people at the line of scrimmage, and the worst nightmare for offensive linemen is not knowing for sure who's coming and who isn't, because it throws off all of your rules. and that's what I seen, and that's Belichick, and even when he was blitzing everyone, or he wasn't blitzing anybody, there was still a bunch of people at the line of scrimmage, and especially if they had one of those condensed formations, and it made it even harder, right? Because now the corner's coming sometimes. There's guys that are like mush rushing and moving around. It's just tough for offensive linemen, and I would attribute a lot of that to a lot of people being at the line of scrimmage and being unsure of who's coming, because especially when you consider the left tackle, you have to know if the nickel is coming. And that kind of and one look out there gets you beat. So without the communication from the slot receiver and the quarterback, so there's a lot of that going on last week.
No, I'm sorry, Adam. Just one point. Normally, obviously the slot is almost always, I'd say 99.9% of the time, he's to the passing strength, because that's where the extra receivers are. And you always have to be aware of a slot coming. And Jason made a great point. If the formation is a little condensed, that slot is closer, and you really have to be aware that he could be part of the pressure package.
Yeah. That's the left tackle's nightmare. He's like, he talks to you more than anybody. If you're a slot receiver, you're the left tackle or the right tackle. Right. Hey, Jason, you got to call him out. You got to make sure. I got to know, cowboy it. That's him talking constantly. Like, dude, shut up. Let me do my job.
What's cowboy? What's cowboy mean? Hey, what is
that? That the nickel is coming.
The
guy over you is coming, and
that doesn't mean just play badly in the fourth quarter.
And that was a call for us to let the tackle know that that he's coming out. That he has to go out.
When you hear, and I get it, the Patriots give you mental gymnastics, particularly when your offense against their defense. But how much do you? And it's hard to quantify this, but people were asking us leading up to the game, so we'll ask you now that they've had a game. Now you've seen the tape. Do you put anything on, hey, starters didn't play in the preseason, they don't practice a lot? Do you think that has any weight to how they played in week 1?
Definitely do. What other thing that you do in life that you can go in and start right away and be good at it? It's not many things, right? So you need reps, just like you guys need reps at ESPN and whatever show you're doing, Inside the Birds. We need reps together in order to get the show like flourishing and doing well. The same way on the football field, you need those reps. It's not like riding a bike, like people would say, oh, it's like riding a bike. No, it isn't. It's time that you put in and honing in your skills. That's why you see a guy that's really good this year and is not as good the next year, because it takes that unity, that chemistry together, especially when you're dealing in a team sport, because you can do your job really well and look bad because the guy next to you didn't do his job really well. Right. So that's how it is.
All right. Well, clearly Jason Avant did not yet catch the first episode of Inside the Tape with Clay Harbor and Greg Cosell, because those guys had 0 reps, and they literally did a show for the Inside the Birds platform that came out last night. That was fantastic, and did a lot of great tape breakdown. So we thank you, Greg. That was amazing stuff. And
you got Greg there. He's like the guru, so he's going to make Clay better, and all that stuff.
Kind.
Yeah, he doesn't need rest. He's like Aaron Rodgers. Oh, never mind.
No. Hey,
let's not get into that.
And all Clay has to do is like,
I did sprain my Achilles when I was in college playing basketball, but fortunately I didn't tear it.
We will get to that in a second, actually. All right, we got to go back to our corners again, reset. This is really good talk about the Eagles offense. And obviously, everybody got used to seeing something almost like poetry in motion last year. To Jason's point, it's a new year, new play caller, right? And Brian Johnson, and not a whole lot. I was surprised to hear Nick Sirianni say maybe next year I will do a little more, only because coaches usually, first of all, it's one game, they won it. And secondly, coaches are usually pretty steeped in what they do. And even last year, they didn't play any. Got most of their starters in the preseason. And
you made a great point, though, Jeff, right now, which needs to be just a comment on, and if Jay can address it as well. Okay. People just think about a play caller. Oh, he calls different plays. Okay, it's not just that. It's hearing a totally different voice in your head with a totally different cadence. The way he gives you the information. You have to. That all has to sort of be assimilated. It's not as easy as everybody thinks. It's a whole different, you're hearing things in a totally different way, and you're worried. Hey, just remember, a play ends. Let's say you've just had a bad play. Okay, now all of a sudden the clock starts winding down, the play clock, and now you're hearing something in your ear, because that's what happens, and you're hearing it a little differently, and you have to stop and think for a second. Oh, okay, and now all of a sudden there's only 20 seconds on the play clock. There's a lot of things going on besides just, hey, fans thinking that's a bad play call. There's so much more going on, and I know, Jay, you could certainly address this, but I mean that means something. That you can't just throw that out like that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and what you're talking about, the headset conversation is more than just the play. It's the play, because a lot of times the play is condensed, because you can say number 122 now and you can go into the play.
Right.
So 122 is just 2 seconds of saying that. And then the other is watch for this and that and this and the other. And that's where coaching comes in. I'm used to this particular style.
Right.
I'm used to the coach breaking it down or having this encouraging word through this process or whatever it may be. Yeah, so there's a lot of information that's going on in that.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, we've got a lot more information for hour 2 of Inside the Birds pregame live. We'll get to that in a minute. First, we want to pause real quick to hear from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com.
All right, welcome back to Inside the Birds pregame live. Thanks for joining us, Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan, joined, of course, with Greg Cosell and Jason Avant. Tonight, the Eagles are 7-point favorites as they come home to open up the link, and apparently people have been tailgating since 4:30 in the morning. Not quite sure what you can accomplish by tailgating at 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, you could probably accomplish a lot, but
more power to them. Yeah, well, I don't know how you make it to the game is my point.
Yeah. I don't do those kinds of things, but from what I understand, you can accomplish a lot.
Apparently you can. I wouldn't know, but apparently you can.
It's Greg, Jeff, I was just going to say, it's kind of like when people say, "Oh, the gentleman's club." Do gentlemen really go to a gentleman's club? I wouldn't know about that. I wouldn't know anything about that.
Hey, let's not cast aspersions. Let's not cast aspersions.
Yeah, well, who knows why this guy was there at 4:30?
That's a great point.
Concrete. Anyway.
Great point. So the over-under is 49, a little bit bigger than last week when it was, I believe, 45.5. I joked about it with you, Greg, and I did want to sort of get your guys' reaction because it's really the storyline of the NFL that really can't be ignored. And I wanted us to have a small discussion about it because I was personally excited for the new environment and the reset for Aaron Rodgers with the Jets. I thought the Jets had a very good defense and running game, and I just can't believe, like 10 minutes into the game, it's all over for him. And I don't know. What was your reaction, Greg? I mean, I as someone who's impartial and just watching a game, there's got to be a little bit of, did that really happen?
In terms of what now?
Just Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles and the whole Jets
funny.
season now.
I did not see it live. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I get home and I just said, I said to my wife, well, I'm just going to look at the score, on my phone before I, get some food and sit down and watch the game, and turn on the game. And I'm like, oh my God, 4 plays in and Aaron Rodgers, at that point they weren't sure, because it had just happened maybe 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But, as soon as you hear the word Achilles, they don't just throw that out lightly. That's not one of those words you just happen to throw out. Oh, I think it's an Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just felt really, really badly. I mean, look, I love seeing great players play. And I love, just like I always love seeing games played in great weather because I want to see athletes play to the highest of their athletic traits.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am. I don't like snow games or rain games. I like to see the athletes perform at their highest level possible. And I want to see great players. And,
right.
It just, obviously I've been watching for a long time. He may be the best pure thrower we've ever seen in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't help but love watching Aaron Rodgers throw a football.
Right. Right. Jason, who knew exactly right away that Aaron Rodgers' Achilles was torn?
Oh,
Aaron Rodgers. The way he just,
yeah.
I mean, you saw the expression on his face. He just sat down and you could just see it on his face. He knew it was over.
Yeah. No, you can when they show the replay, you can see it rupture inside of his, the
Mm-hmm.
skin was there, but you can see it like how it coils.
Yeah.
So you can see it was, and the night was so perfect. Patriotic night, him in the dark stadium with the flag coming out.
Yep.
I was like, oh, this is a good thing. And what guy is really devastated is Garrett Wilson, because you go from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson. That's a big drop off, and when you're talking about Aaron Rodgers, you could be possibly up there for top 5 in receiving in the NFL with Aaron Rodgers, so that's a big hit to that young man as well.
Adam, do we see Nick Foles pop up in East Rutherford?
Well, Joe Douglas knows him, it's one way or the other. But yeah, so they're going to go with Zach Wilson going forward. Tim Boyle is going to be their backup for the time being, and they're not on Joe Flacco right now. Did a good job last year for him. It's kind of a weird deal. It's a shame. Wilson, look, they obviously felt that Wilson couldn't take him to the playoffs. That's why they made the trade for Rodgers. But as a purist of the game, yeah, I'm really bummed. And I friends with the Jets and my friends who were Jet fans from the New York and New Jersey area. It sucks for them. But the difference, people bring up the Nick Foles situation. Well, let's call it like it is. It was very late in 2017 after the Rams game that Nick took over. Yeah. This is basically for 16 games plus you hope the playoffs. But hey, and by the way, they won that game, which was a miracle,
right?
In of itself, thanks to Josh Allen deciding to not play within structure. But the fact of the matter is, it sucks for football. And I agree with what Greg said. I just, as a purist of the game, I really want to see him play. And those poor Jets fans, what they've had to suffer through, it's been really tough. But I know the Philadelphia fans love it because hey, it's New York. But overall, if you love the NFL, you really want to see Aaron Rodgers. By the way, highest Monday night ratings in over 20 years, and that's how the game was.
Which begs the question, Adam, or to me anyway, is the career of Carson Wentz over?
Well, I thought about that too, Greg, and I felt like Aaron Rodgers getting hurt was the most Jets thing ever. And then if the Jets were to sign Carson Wentz, I feel like that would also be the most Jets thing ever. That
he was so lost with Washington last year. We know about how the Eagles sacked. What do they have? 10 sacks against him?
Nine times.
Yeah. Okay. His mechanics were really bad. I look. if we've learned anything, quarterbacks in their 30s could revive their career. He turns 30 in December, I think. But he's fallen off so badly. It's hard to believe he could regain it, but a lot of it's up to him, not so much coaching. He's got to be taking the coaching, and he's got to be broken down mechanically. But he's an off-season project. That's the thing.
Right.
To ask him to come to a team now, Jeff, I don't know that it could be done. He needs a full offseason with a coaching staff that could revive his mechanics. That's the part about his game, Jeff, that's been ruined. His footwork was atrocious with Washington. The arm is still there.
Right.
But everything else is bad. He's fallen off so badly. It's almost hard to believe, but it is what it is in a league that, by the way, is starved for quarterback development.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see what happens there. Getting back to this game, as we talk about the Eagles defense, Jason, as someone who's played, you've had great games at the Link. You know what the Link is like. You know how loud it is. Primetime game. I don't think it can be understated the absence of the Vikings center, right? Garrett Bradbury, the communication up front. I imagine the Vikings will have to rely on a silent count at times, tonight, if not for most of the game. How difficult will that be for the Vikings?
It will be, because the silent count it's easier for the offensive line, but it's harder for everybody else because it's usually the same cadence. It's very rarely do they go off of it, right? So it's usually a leg tap by the guard, a left turn, and snap the ball.
Right.
And everybody in the stadium knows that. And you got your backup center in there, and you got, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox lining up over this guy. I just think that, that it'll make a very, very tough night for them. And then you add in the crowd noise, you add in how excited the Philadelphia fan base is for the first game at the Link. Mm-hmm. And all the excitement of last year just in this one moment, it'll be very, very tough for the opposing team tonight. Very tough.
Just add that to the list of things that the Vikings will have to deal with tonight, that crowd noise. All right, so we hate to be the people that say, I told you so, but we're going to be the people that said, I told you so right now. The Eagles made a risky roll of the dice going into the year with just 3 off-ball linebackers on their 53. Yes, they did have 2 on their practice squad, but they went into the game with just 3. And now, as we discussed before, with Nakobe Dean out on IR, short-term IR, at least 4 games, that complicates the situation for them. We know that most the likely starters tonight are going to be Zach Cunningham and probably Christian Ellis, and we'll see what happens with Nick Morrow. But even before we get to Cunningham and Ellis, Greg, Nakobe Dean against the run, I thought was very active, very smart. I know you and Clay Harbor talked about it on the show, on the tape breakdown show. But until he got hurt, he was clearly someone who was, to me, standing out for being the smart linebacker that they said he was coming out of Georgia, understanding how to diagnose and how to get to places despite not being the biggest guy in the world to make the tackle.
Well, I thought that's what the tape showed. He's very quick to key and diagnose, so he's able to play downhill with some juice and aggressiveness. Mm-hmm. And, obviously you don't want him being in a situation where offensive linemen are climbing up to him. He'll get swallowed up. But, he's always been small. That's the thing. He's never been 6'4". So, this is the way he's had to play his whole career at linebacker. And I thought he showed the kind of player that he is. It's not so much the tackle totals. It's the way in which he plays. And he was able to see things really quickly. He reacts fast and he gets downhill in a hurry. So, no, I thought he played well until he got hurt.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. And we also learned, Jason, right, that at least for one game, Sean Desai may have a different concept of the structure of his defensive front than Jonathan Gannon did. We saw a whole lot more traditional nickel, we'll call it 4-2 front, right, than we ever did with last year with Jonathan Gannon. Why do you think that was? And what do you think that added to the defense or brought to the defense?
That's just different coordinators and, a guy with, NFL pedigree. And also you have to go out and trust your players. I think you got a veteran group. And, the excuse of we heard that in the years past, I don't have my players and all of those things. You got to go out, just like we talked about Brian Flores. He may not have his players, but he runs his defense. And I believe that was a part of Sean Desai's plan, was just to go out and run what he runs. And when you have as much talent as you have up front, you need to be multiple in the defensive front. You have to be. So that's the only thing I can say about that.
Sure.
When it comes to Christian Ellis, Nakobe Dean, and Cunningham in the passing game, we need help of route recognition, understanding concepts, right? That's what veteran players do. Cunningham at times looked very lost in space when it comes to things like that. It looks very lost. And that's just that comes with time. And that's why I think you need a veteran player, a seasoned veteran linebacker, to be able to handle some, especially when you start to get to third downs, when there's heavy passing. I don't necessarily know if we'll be able to get that done with these guys.
Adam, is it too soon to have the TJ Edwards Appreciation Day? But think about how often last year we kept saying on Inside the Birds, Eagles fans, cherish what you're getting right now out of two linebackers, him and Kaiser White, who are not first-round picks, more developmental stories, and how well they played and stabilized the Eagles defense, right? I mean, you're starting to already see a little bit of that impact there.
Remember we said leading into the season last year, the Eagle fans will no longer be embarrassed by their off-the-ball linebackers. And we were right. TJ Edwards, where we were wrong on Edwards 2 years, a year before that, we didn't think he was going to make it. I mean, other than being a backup, I give the kid credit. You were that nugget a couple of years ago. He was working on his drops and his pass coverage. He wasn't great at it, but he came better at it. Such a short tackler, decent blitzer, physical, tough, dependable. This guy was an undrafted free agent. It's a great story development. He's making $6 million a year. Good for him with the Bears.
He isn't making as much money as you thought he would.
No, some people said 10. I'm like, he's not worth $10 million a year, but $6 million for a guy with an undrafted free agent, Jason. Though
he did get burned this week on it. He did get burned this week on an angle right out of the backfield by Aaron Jones in man coverage.
But guess what? Better than any Eagles linebacker, and that was the point Jeff was making. And Kaiser White, nice story. We said last year he'd be better than Corey Nelson, who never made it. Who was the other one, Jeff? The other guy?
Oh, I mean, we can go with Nate
Wilson.
Taylor. We could go with Duke Riley. We could talk about a bunch of guys.
Eric Wilson. Was it Eric Wilson?
Eric Wilson.
Yes.
Right, and he was a good player, and Gannon wanted his guy, so he went to Arizona. But now you see that Cunningham is a good run guy. What did we talk about 2 weeks ago, Jeff? Teams are going to go after. They're not going to wait to third down. They're going to go after Cunningham on first and second down, which you watch when you watch the tape. You made a note.
To Jay's point, Cunningham's always had that issue. He's been a tackling machine in the run game, but he's never been considered a very good pass coverage defender.
Watch Hawkinson tonight, by the way. Yeah. Watch him.
Well, Jason made an interesting point that the Eagles need help there, and certainly that help ain't coming tonight. I don't know who's walking through the door other than Nick Morrow, right?
It's called that defensive line and the backup center. That's the help for tonight.
Okay. That's what it has to be. Because this is, for fans who are thinking, the Vikings came in here last year and the Eagles beat them badly. This is a totally different Vikings offense in terms of first of all, Jefferson wasn't quite Jefferson week 2 last year after what he did last year. When, by the way, more than a third of, or about a third of his targets last year came in the slot. So, that's something to consider. Plus, he's used in motion a lot more than he was week 2 last year. And Hawkinson wasn't there. And Hawkinson is a big-time tight end who can detach from the formation. They did not have that player last year.
And Jordan Addison is more explosive than Adam Thielen.
Right.
And he's just a younger, more explosive, and Osborne is a good player as well. So he's come on. He's another year of maturity. So it's definitely a different team.
Sure. And I know we have some viewer questions real quick about how the Eagles might deploy their secondary and Darius Slay. We'll get to that in a little bit in the show. Your point, Adam?
Yeah, I want to get back to Greg on. There's a guy, number 84, and this guy's career, it's almost hard to believe, but Josh Oliver, number 84.
Oh, yeah.
When he came in from San Jose State, he was known as a vertical tight end. Greg, he's now one of the best blocking tight ends in football. What have you seen?
Yeah, but I'm glad you said that, Adam, because he is not a bad athlete. See, he's not one of those old school blocking tight ends that can't move. He actually, when I did his tape at San Diego State, was it San Diego State or San Jose State? San Jose, right. I remember thinking, this guy, he's going to be an NFL player because he's got really good movement. He wasn't a bad blocker. He obviously has worked on his blocking a lot, but he is not a non-athlete by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, he does have vertical ability. He can stretch the seam. He can run. Now, they don't use him as a true receiver, in the way that the big-time tight end receivers are deployed, but, he can run. He's not... to throw a name out from 100 years ago, it's not like he's Kyle Brady, who is basically a glorified tackle. Sorry, Jeff.
Hey, by the way,
it was coming.
Jeff, $7 million a year, Josh Oliver, $7 million a year for a backup tight end. They're investing $24 million between APY between Hockenson and Oliver. It's insane.
Couldn't have said Jay Reamer's ma, huh? Couldn't have gone with a Michigan.
Oh my gosh, from the Bills. No.
Yeah, but he was long and athletic as opposed to the other type.
Yes, as long I remember.
Yeah.
Hey, 94 was a great year, undefeated. That's all I care about. Let me go back to the linebacker situation though, because Christian Ellis will almost assuredly step in to that role. A nice story for the Eagles as far as helping out the special teams. He is fairly fast, especially for his size. One of the children of Luther Ellis that we brought up, former Lions defensive tackle Luther Ellis. Greg, what did you see when he came in and had to play some extended snaps from him?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't really notice him in either a good way or a bad. And I'm just being honest. Okay. I don't want to say something out of school where I'm wrong, and maybe Jay studied him in greater detail, but I didn't really notice him one way or the other. And I'm, like I said, I'll be the first to tell you if I don't know something or I don't feel good talking about it. And I just didn't really get a feel for him one way or the other.
Okay. Jason, is there anything that
and like I said, understand, like a linebacker that has instinct, and football players that have like a natural pass game instinct. And this is how you think about it. If there's an arrow in front of me, there's a dig behind me.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? That's just how it goes. You're eliminating things. There's a crosser in front of me. There's going to either be a slant or a dig behind me that's pulling me. He's trying to get me out of my area. And I don't think that Christian Ellis and the guys that you have that instinct yet. And that takes time to be able to understand formations and the chances of this route concept happening. Oh, they run China. That's an arrow. That's a flat route, and that's a corner. Okay, I see the arrow. Let's see if the guy goes to flat. Oh, it's China, right? That type of thing. They don't have that, and that's all I'll say.
Yeah,
it's not second nature to them yet.
Yeah,
right.
Not yet.
Right. And obviously tonight for Christian Ellis,
it's so fascinating. And this is a whole different conversation that we've had probably before. It's really fascinating that the Eagles, who have been a very good team, obviously, so I'm not taking sides here. I'm just making a point. It's fascinating that they don't really value stack backers. And let's say a team like the Niners, obviously a very good team with a great defense, they have the best stack backer in the game, hands down, plus another player who's a really good stack backer. So they obviously value that, and they're two critical pieces of the way they play defense. So I always find different philosophies fascinating because there's really no right or wrong. Some people think there is, but you can win 10 different ways in this league. But I find that stuff really fascinating, how some teams have a certain worldview and they're successful, and other teams have a different worldview and they're successful as well. It's that I don't know, maybe that people don't find that interesting. I do.
Yeah,
I do. The Steelers are another team that really places a lot of emphasis on off-ball linebackers, middle linebackers, and they've been very successful.
Yep.
We're actually more on outside pass rusher, some money,
that too.
Some cap on inside. Let me get back to Ellis, because it's funny Jason brings up what he was talking about Ellis. In his scouting report, we were told from other teams, gets stuck in recognition, has really good athleticism, but doesn't sort very well.
Right.
That's one of the reasons. It's just funny he brought that up, and that's exactly in his scouting report, because we had asked about that. And this is what you worry about when you put guys who aren't ready on the field. You're asking for it, and we're going to find out tonight, because I'm telling you, Hockenson, they're going to get him the football.
And there are some guys who, even with experience, just don't see it the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, even with experience.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Yeah. I just happen to be watching this defense today, and and this player is a great athlete. He was a first-round pick a year ago. Devin Lloyd from Utah, who's with the Jaguars. He's just doesn't register with him. He's a great athlete. He's in his second year. Whether it ends up registering or not, I can't answer that. But right now, you can clearly see it's like a quarterback. He just doesn't see it.
Yeah, and it happens like that. It can be the best athlete in the world, like you guys talked about earlier. And then there are some guys that just have enough athleticism to be in the NFL, but they understand where the ball is going or where the ball is designed to go. I remember Antonio, a linebacker used to drive me nuts is Antonio Pierce. He used to drive me nuts. He was older than I was. But when it come to recognizing the pass game and understanding where he needed to be in space, the dude knew where the ball was going.
Oh, you should hear Steve Spagnuolo talk about him. I mean, he talks about him like he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it just happens but he knew where the ball was going. Like he understood where the holes, and that's a part of it. Understanding your defense and where the defense is weak. And if I'm going to err, I'm going to err where the defense is weak at. Right. So it's like a mixture of those things. And some guys have, some guys don't.
I tell you what, though, Andy did catch Pierce in some man situations with Brian Westbrook in the slot more than one or two times.
It wasn't because he didn't know it. He just wasn't athletic enough.
Hey, not many words, Jay. You know that when it came to Westbrook.
We love TJ Edwards, but he got beat this weekend.
Right?
And he got beat pretty easily too, by the way.
I remember Jeremiah trying to run out and cover Reggie Bush, later in his career. Just, some great linebacker.
Oh God, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, just certain things, it just happens. Time catches up with us all.
Yes, in a playoff game, nonetheless, that you're referring to. So listen, the worst thing that could happen for the Eagles tonight would be to have another injury at inside linebacker because they're already thin there and already inexperienced. So you'd
probably see at that point, believe it or not, is you'd see Edmonds play
Terrell Edmonds like last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Terrell Edmonds, a box safety.
He's been a box safety a good part of his career. And essentially, depending on how it was taught in Pittsburgh, gaps are gaps. I mean, so, theoretically, can he play there? Yes. Do you want that? No. But he's done it before.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about some of those compensation players we were talking about, the help for the inside linebackers. And certainly I think help for Nakobe Dean last week was having such a great interior front with Jordan Davis, a guy we talked about a lot this offseason. And of course, Jalen Carter, a guy we've talked a lot of since they drafted him in the first round overall. These two guys played together at Georgia. Davis was a first round pick 2 years ago, Jalen Carter this year. I'm sure everybody has, been on X or Twitter or social media and seen the pass rush stats or the run win rate. Greg, they both played fairly well. I mean, I think we could all sit here and
I would say more than fairly well.
Yeah, more than fairly well. But I want to start with Davis more because it's not that I didn't expect either of them to play well, but Davis was big because of what happened last year with him and the need for him, right, to be conditioned and to be able to stay on the field. What did you say?
Well, first of all, let's start with the fact that he played 35 snaps. Yes. And that's absolutely critical because that's what you want, and maybe he gets to play 40. But the point is, that's the starting point. And 22 of those came against the pass, 13 against the run, okay? So now he's not a pass rusher yet, although you did see a couple of times immediate quickness off the ball. He just doesn't have the secondary element of pass rush yet. That he has to be taught. But in the run game, he was incredibly strong. You saw what he is. He stalemates blocks. He defeats blocks. He played, I thought, really, really well. And I was really happy to see that because I'm telling you, and I took a lot of grief from people on social media, that I don't like Jordan Davis. There's no agenda here. I was watching his tape last year, and if he had to play 3 snaps in a row, by the third snap, he just stood up and there was nothing left to him, right. and that's why he could only play 20 snaps a game. But he played 35 snaps, and I thought he played at a pretty high level and he played a lot of 3 technique, by the way. So that was important too, because, now you're trying to groom him to be more than just, a Linville Joseph type. And nothing against Linville Joseph. He was phenomenal in his career at being what he was. But, he was not going to be a 3 technique.
Right.
And then, of course, Jalen Carter. I mean, the guy's just, he's a freak of nature. I mean, the guy is so quick off the ball. He can win with quickness. He is so sudden in a small area. So, and I think that's a trait that not many have. There's a lot of guys who are powerful and can move a guy. There are a lot of guys that have quick hands, and use their hands well. But in a small space, his suddenness, which then equates to strength and power and explosiveness, I think is as good as you're going to see. I mean, this guy he's going to be a great, great player.
Jason, when I was thinking about what the Eagles 4-man rush would look like months ago, right, knowing that they had different players in and that Jalen Carter was a rookie, and knowing they had success with Brandon Graham moved inside in a 4-man rush before, I was thinking to myself, you'll have Reddick and you'll have Sweat on the outside, and you'll have Cox and BG on the inside for the most part, and then they'll figure out ways to get Jalen Carter. No, I mean, forget it. Jalen Carter's probably not going to be coming out of that role anytime soon, right? From what you saw on tonight, he's probably one of the big keys of the game with them being on their backup center.
Yeah, he was amazing last week, and that's something when it comes to pass rush. And he did well in the run game, but when it comes to pass rush, he was amazing. And because he is sudden, and he is quick, when he changes direction with that power, is just hard. And that's one of the sacks he had. He was going over to the right, real sudden move, gets the guy off balance, and then he puts his power into you. It's just too much. It gets you off balance, just too much. I'll say this, and Brandon Graham played 25% of the snaps. That's a huge decline from last year, and you kind of see why, because Jordan Davis's snaps is up, and Jalen Carter, both of those guys played almost 50% of the snaps. So that's trending in the right direction. Now,
one guy that I think needs to be mentioned, and he's not talked about enough in my view, is Milton Williams.
Yes.
I thought Milton Williams played really well. He was incredibly stout against the run, and he's got pass rush ability, and he can line up in multiple positions along your front. The other thing that really surprised me was Fletcher Cox played 50 snaps. I would never have expected that going in.
Still the game too.
And he played well, don't you think, Jay?
Yeah.
Not only that, he played well later in the game. Like in
the last quarter, he sealed the game. Yeah, his two plays that they sealed the game.
One tactical point, and this is the influence and impact of a new coordinator. They stunted far more against the Patriots than they did a year ago. Their stunt percentage was more than double of what it was all last season, and that's the influence of a coordinator. And by the way, if there's a new center, not if, there will be a different center, and if there's a different left tackle, I would expect that you'll see more of that because stunting is mental as well as physical for an offensive lineman. And if you have a guy in there who's, doesn't have a lot of experience, a lot of snaps, you want to make him think through the reps.
Yeah. What Greg just said, Adam, brings me back to some conversations we would have last year with certain league personnel on defensive side of the ball who would see Eagles tape and wonder, and again, we're not trying to pile on Jonathan Gannon here, but this is something that was brought up to us with the athleticism that they had up front, why they didn't do a little bit more of that slanting, and especially when they were struggling against the run to try to get, the offensive line off of them and try to just, redirect the run in a better way away from the linebackers.
Yeah, you talk about playing the games up front. Yeah, and look, as we've learned, whether it's our friend Trey Thomas or other offensive line guys that we know, communication is so important, particularly when you have backup linemen starting. And playing in the Link tonight, this is the Eagles' home opener. It's going to be really difficult for them because when you look at the matchups, if they could protect, they're going to want to throw the football. But Greg was right to start the show. Yeah, it's if you could protect. This is the one thing that you worry about. If they can't protect, the Eagles will blow them out. If they could protect, this is going to be a tight game. That's just the way that the matchups would dictate it. The offensive skill position personnel, receiver and tight end, versus the depleted back seven for the Eagles. Who's going to win? Who's going to be able? If you can't protect, you lose. If you can protect, this is going to be a game.
Yeah. And I'll throw this to you guys because I've heard some people say this week and ask us, won't the Patriots won't the Vikings just try to do what the Patriots did, which is throw to the tight end a lot, play big? And the Vikings aren't built that way necessarily. They have really good playmakers, right, that they would want to try to get the ball to compared to what the Patriots have on the outside.
Well, Justin Jefferson in the slot a bunch last week. So it's not necessarily, don't view it as as a guy. He's a guy, but he's moving everywhere.
That's correct.
And so you even so that slot guy can do what the tight end is doing. So another thing too, this kind of grinded my gears last week, and this is why you say Nick Sirianni, if you're looking at it, you say maybe our guys need to play in the preseason. Your two corners, Pro Bowlers, by the way, get beat on the oldest route concept in the world in the red zone. One at the 20-yard line, one at about the 13, 14-yard line. Kendrick Bourne, double post.
Right.
Like, you just don't like if they're playing preseason games, that does not happen. You don't get beat double post twice in one game.
Right. That's interesting because
it just doesn't happen. You don't see that later on in the year.
Right.
Not in one game. You're not gonna get beat double post twice.
The one right before halftime to Bourne, was it? He was sort of I think Blankenship was right there with him. Am I correct with that?
No, it's James Bradbury who
I remember that one. I just meant the other one. Yeah.
Oh no, that was Darius Slay.
Okay, I thought there was one where Blankenship was right there and Mac just put a really nice throw right toward.
Oh no, that's a tight end. That was a tight end.
Oh, okay. That
was a seam. Right. That was a seam.
Okay, so that's not one of the ones you're talking about.
And that was just a great throw.
That's what I thought.
I thought Reed had great coverage. No, James Bradbury's butt to the quarterback's defense that you don't play.
Right.
And got turned for one. But it's double post. It's like, that's the thing I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about an out route from the 20-yard line. I'm just not.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And then Darius Slay looking in the backfield trying to get another easy pick. That's what it was. Like,
Are you talking about the first touchdown of Bourne, Jay? The 19-yarder?
Which one was that? The one he beat Bradbury on the post.
The one he beat Bradbury on the post, yeah. Because Blankenship actually ran to the slot. I think they were playing. They're playing quarters.
Playing quarters, yeah.
All right. So the point being, the point I wanted to say though is that Minnesota doesn't play like New England, correct?
Not
as far
close.
as offensively, right?
No.
So what Minnesota would like to do is to be able to get explosive plays out of Jefferson, out of Addison, and out of Hawkinson. But as we're mentioning, in order to do that, you have to be able to block it up front. So that sort of creates the conundrum, right? And Greg, you kind of sometimes wonder if coaches think, all right, you know what? I'm probably going to get sacked 5 to 6 times, but if I can hold on to the ball there, and if I can hit on 3 to 5 downfield, my point is, I think Minnesota has to take its shots, knowing that.
Yeah, but now you get into how you approach a game, and this is where your defense theoretically has to help you as well. Because do you approach this as a 4-quarter game and think, okay, let me start the game. Let me maybe throw a bunch of screens. Let me see if I can get the Jordan Davises and the Carters to have to run laterally all over the field, as opposed to just rushing the quarterback. Let me try to wear them out, and then maybe in the third quarter I come out and the pass rush is slowed down a little bit, and then I can do what I'd ultimately like to do. Because if you just line up with deeper drops, which I don't believe they'll do, then you're setting yourself up for failure, because you're probably not going to be able to protect like that.
Right.
But to Jay's point, not only do they move Jefferson around, they move all their receivers around. They can all line up in different spots. Hawkinson is like that as well, and he's a really good athlete. I mean, he moves like a big wide receiver. Osborne can line up in the slot and outside, and I like Osborne. So can Addison. He did that in college. So there's a lot of people probably saying now, well, they'll just put Slay on Jefferson. Well, that sounds good, but it's not going to, that doesn't mean he's never going to be on him. Of course, he will be on him at times, but they move him all over the formation, and I don't believe Slay's going to do that. Maybe I'll be wrong, but Jay, I see you shaking your head. I think you agree with me. That's not going to happen on 70 snaps.
Well, it's hard to happen this week because you don't have James Bradbury. Remember, when you follow a guy, someone else has to know multiple assignments. It's
Correct.
Not just as easy as, okay, let's just put Slay on. No. You're changing the assignment and placement of everybody else. And when you have new guys, that's not the best situation to do. So what you'll end up having is a guy playing in a spot that he's comfortable with, and you putting a safety over the top to try to mitigate Jefferson. But it's very, very hard to have, okay, let's just put Slay on this side. they got beat for a touchdown because last week the Buccaneers, the touchdown to Jordan Addison was because of Justin Jefferson being in the slot, running the corner, in the cornerback that was outside, Carlton Davis, who was shadowing him most of the game. Most of the game. Forgot to run with the post in front of him,
Yikes. That was a beautiful quarters beater, though, because Scissors is a great quarters beater.
No, it's a beautiful quarters beater, but it makes it even better when you have your best player being the cheese, being the bait.
Right.
And you could almost make the argument, we won't know till we play the game, you could almost make the argument with a new corner in Josh Jobe, a different safety, that you almost line up and play a little more vanilla just because you don't want the mistakes. See, the last thing you want is to give up 60-yard touchdowns because you want to try to do a lot of cool stuff to take care of Jefferson. You may think in terms of, hey, let's just let Jobe line up and play. Let's just let, whether it's Sidney Brown or Edmonds, let them just line up and play and do what they do and not get caught up in checks and adjustments and communication, because now you got issues.
Yeah, and it was a lot easier to shadow him last year because he wasn't inside as much as he was this first game. Right. So now that's a totally now because he's inside, now two people have to change responsibility, not just two other people besides Slay, right? Because he's inside. What do the other two people do? It's a lot going on.
And he's in motion a lot now too. Across the formation, and so now you get caught up in change of offensive strength, and now people have to move. It might lead you to play quarters because quarters balances the coverage, and you don't necessarily have to move people. So you may end up getting a little more simpler in your coverages.
Yeah, which is a problem as well. It's a lot. It's a lot to figure out with these guys.
There's a lot more than just put Slay on him. That's
What I'm getting from this conversation is that Justin Jefferson might catch 200 passes this year.
He's going to catch a lot of passes tonight.
Well, what you're getting from the conversation is
don't mean he's going to win, but I believe he's going to catch a lot of balls tonight.
Yeah, that is true. Hey, I wanted to get back to the initial point on the interior pass rushers we were talking about because they were all over the next gen stats. In fact, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, and Milton Williams, according to next gen stats, were the three fastest interior pass rushers in the entire league. All three,
wow.
1, 2, 3. Jalen Carter at 0.68. This is the get off on line of scrimmage. Fletcher Cox 0.72 and Milton Williams 0.72. I mean, there's 200 of these guys, and the Eagles are 1, 2, and 3.
Well, and the tape validated that, Jeff. The tape validated that.
Hey, I believe it did.
Jeff, you know what's really interesting? Talking to John D. Filippo today, before we started our Patreon interview, he goes, "Hey, before we start, do you mind if I talk about defense? Because I know you want me to just talk about what I saw from the offensive tape." I said, "Sure." Why? He's like, "Because I cannot believe how good 98, whatever Jordan Davis number 90,
90, yeah."
He just was blown away. He couldn't believe the pressure that they were able to get up front. Now, what we didn't mention, okay, the Patriots were playing three backups, but the tape showed, as Jeff and Jason were talking about, and Greg was so dominant. This is so fascinating as we set up tonight's game. Can they repeat that success? Can they bring that same energy? You would think they would. The game's at home now. This is a home opener. Jalen Carter's first game at home in the regular season. That's the thing. Can they bring the same juice, guys, defensively? Because if they do, that's probably where this game's going to be won.
Yeah, I would think so. And you know what? We probably spent so much time talking about the backup center and the obstacles there. But Greg, the guards, how would you? Those are obviously a big part of the interior protection too. How would you describe Viking guards?
I think Cleveland, the left guard, who was a tackle in college, has done well in this league as a guard, making the transition. He's at this point, career-wise, he's the better of the two. The right guard is Ed Ingram, a second-year player from LSU, whose tape I really like coming out. He had a very up-and-down rookie season last year, some really good moments, but some other times where he was clearly struggled. They'll probably look to attack him. They're totally different kinds of guys. Cleveland is kind of long, whereas Ingram is stouter. So they're totally different kinds of players. Because like I said, Cleveland was a tackle, I believe, at Boise State. And, a lot of people thought he could be a tackle in the league, but he became a guard. He's the better of the two players.
Okay. And it sounds like maybe a little bit bigger than what the Patriots had at guard, right? Because they had.
Cleveland's built differently. He's almost built more like a tackle, which is what he was.
Gotcha.
Because he's probably 6'5" or 6'6".
Awesome. All right. Well, the Eagles did put a lot of pressure up front. Mac Jones still completed 65% of his passes and passed for more than 300 yards. So we're going to get into a little bit more on the back end of the Eagles defense in a minute. I do want to take a second right now, as always, to thank our production team of James and Zach. They are back behind the wheels. They bring Inside the Birds pregame live to you in high definition with great graphics and videos and more. They are, they're like the hamsters that run around the wheel. They power this show. We just show up and, talk ball. These guys are unbelievable in how well they are to work with. So we thank them. They do hard work. I want to tell them how much we appreciate them. That's our team of James and Zach. Thank you guys so much. All right. So again, I want to kind of sort of now get back into that conversation of the back end of the Eagles defense, because even with that great pressure that they got up front, we did see Mac Jones settle into the game, make some nice throws. And now the conversation turns to Kirk Cousins, who has a real NFL arm and has been quarterbacking for quite a while. So Greg, I know he had 2 fumbles and an interception last week against the Bucs.
Yeah, yes, he did. I mean, the interception he threw in the red zone was a really bad one, and he knew it as soon as he threw it. He threw it to the wrong receiver, and he was late, and so it was a bad interception.
Right.
But Todd Bowles on defense, they did a ton of really cool things with zone pressures, which Todd Bowles is known for. He's a zone pressure guy. So they broke down the protection a couple of times. But Cousins is a professional quarterback. I know that he's, for some reason, he's a whipping boy for a lot of people. I don't know why. The guy's had a really good career. He seemingly has 2 or 3 bad games every season, but other than that, he plays really, really well. He's an efficient player. He's a pocket quarterback. His arm is better than average, not a gun, but he's not really lacking with the ability to make throws. He's smart. He's aware. It just every once in a while he has one of those games or makes a throw that you scratch your head. But he's a professional quarterback, and he's been pretty good for a number of years now.
Okay. Yeah, you just don't understand sometimes with Kirk Cousins, because it's just like this stat line, right? You throw for over 300 yards. You got Justin Jefferson on your team. We talk about all the weapons he had, Osborne and Addison and Hockenson. You see all of these things, and then you say, how do you score 17 points, right? Because there's other things that happen through the game that he gets blamed for.
Right.
One was a protection breakdown. The other one was just happenstance that his guard knocks the ball out of his hand while he's trying to complete a handoff. One interception, right? So of those things, maybe one of them was his mistake, and the others are just, one was happenstance, the other one the defense coordinator got you, right? Sure. So, but he gets blamed for it all, and that's just how the NFL is when it comes to quarterback.
So Adam, we weren't surprised to see that Justin Evans was the starter alongside Reed Blankenship, because it was trending that way toward the end of the preseason, and we know that the Eagles still really don't have a total clear picture of what their starting safety should be, and Sidney Brown's on the come up and all of that. Justin Evans was out there. Greg, how did you think Justin Evans fared? I mean, it seemed like they tried to pick on him at times.
Yeah. Justin Evans to me has always been kind of an enigma, wrapped in a riddle. I mean, the guy came out of A&M as a second round pick of the Bucs. Really good athlete, good size, move well. Most people thought he'd be an early starter in his career and be a really good player, and it hasn't worked out. And there was one year he missed totally. I forget what year it was. He didn't even play. Then last year with the Saints, he basically was a dime safety. That's when he played. I watch him sometimes, and we spoke about guys that just don't necessarily see it the way they're supposed to see it. I kind of feel like he falls into that category. Jay, you could probably jump in here as well. Because his athletic traits suggest that he should have been a really good player, but he never really became a full-time starter. And, that's the way his career has gone. He always seems to get signed because people look at the size and the athletic traits and the movement and feel like, wow, this guy looks like what a safety should look like. And he moves like what a safety should look like, but there's something missing in his game.
Yeah. I would just say this from the first game. I thought that he was in a spot, but no plays.
Right.
That's all. That's the only thing I can say. Remember, it's a small sample size.
Right.
You know, and that's all I'll say. We'll see more as the season goes on, but I don't think it's enough to comment currently.
Yeah,
what Greg is talking about, as far as past and what he's seeing, I understand it completely, 100%. I understand it, and based on what the tape, it doesn't disprove anything, and so I think we just need more information to kind of see what Evans is going to be with the Eagles. Right now, after this first few plays that he's had in this game, that toward the end of this game or what have you, he was there. He was a participant. He was a participant.
He should present. I'm here. Everybody raise your hand. I'm here.
Yeah.
Here are the inactives: Gainwell, Tanner McKee, James Brad. We know about Blankenship. We know about Tyler Steen again, Moro Ojomo, and Alberto. Alberto.
So Moro's inactive.
Yes.
No, not Nick Morrow. Moro Ojomo.
Moro Ojomo.
Oh, Moro Ojomo. Yeah.
And for the Vikings, Jaron Hall, third string quarterback, Nick Muse, Andre Carter, the second, Garrett Bradbury, and Greg asked about this guy. He's inactive again, Shaquellen Roy.
Okay.
So Darisol's not inactive.
Nope, he's active.
That means he's going to start. Yeah, he's not being active to stand on the sideline.
You would think so, correct?
Yeah.
Say that again. Who are you talking about, Greg?
Darisol.
Yeah.
Darisol will start, right? And obviously Marcus Davenport will be active for the first time.
Yeah, he is. Good point. Yep, that's big. Oh, okay. They got more
an extra pass rusher. That's right. Jason, back to the safety conversation, because now without Reed Blankenship, who I thought played a fairly decent game against the Patriots, you have who? You have Justin Evans participating, and do you go with old reliable, I guess, in Terrell Edmonds, or have you seen enough in your mind of Sidney Brown to say, I'll live with your mistakes to get the juice that you bring?
I don't think anybody's seen enough of Sidney Brown. I this is one good sign, is that I seen him on special teams, and that's usually a good indicator when you start seeing guys show up on special teams, especially from safety and linebacker position. If you can't dominate special teams as a safety and linebacker, you can't play on offense. I mean, you can't play on defense. It's just how it is, right? So that's a good sign. But I think that based on them signing Terrell Edmonds, him having more experience, I just don't see how it wouldn't be him to start out. Rookies, will hurt you at some point, and just the inexperience. So you have to go with the older player at this stage.
Yeah, I think that
when you
sense.
need some.
Let me ask you.
Huh?
I was going to say, let me ask you this. I'm sorry to interrupt. A totally different thought. Finish talking, because a totally unrelated thought just crossed my brain.
Oh, okay, I promise I'll come back to you on your.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. It just
that's okay.
In my head.
That's all right. But Adam, I think you agree. You expect Terrell Edmonds to start from the experience. If you're Kirk Cousins, you're thinking, if I can just get 3 seconds, right?
Yeah.
I see Josh Jobe. I see Terrell Edmonds, who's never been a very good cover safety. I see Justin Evans. I see these linebackers. Just give me like 3 seconds, guys.
2.27 or 2.5.
2.7. Yeah.
Right. The fact, but here's the thing, though. We go back to Josh Jobe. It's been, by the way, a very good story. He had a very good training camp.
Sure.
But this was never supposed to be the story. The story is supposed to be Greedy Williams. They missed on Greedy Williams. They cut him. In fact, he didn't even make it to the 53 cut down. So they're throwing Jobe out there, who had a draftable grade by the Eagles and other teams. There were some character issues with him as why he didn't get drafted. We looked into that today. We want to get a little bit more background, but you're now asking a guy who's not drafted. That's the bottom line to start tonight. This is on your question, your point. This is going to be interesting because Eagles are starting a lot of guys who should not be playing tonight. And the story's protection. If they get it, there could be some plays tonight. If not, the Vikings are in trouble. I now, as we just talked about, Darisol is playing tonight, so that's a relief for them. But we all just talked about it, the four of us. The Eagles' interior, their offensive, the defensive line was incredible last week. Not all game, but for a lot of it. If they get off to a good start, watch Cousins start turning the ball over, or because he didn't move very well, by the way. He gets stuck sometimes. I'm just fascinated to see what this first quarter looks like for this defensive line.
Yeah, this is one of those games where if I'm the defense coordinator, and I'm not, but of course, I would test Kevin O'Connell's patience. And that's a concept. I just don't think that he has the patience to consistently run the ball.
So you're playing a lot of soft zone. Is that what you're telling me? You're
like
guys back.
No, you want him to rush your four. Right. But I'm not going to blitz a bunch with this guy. I just don't necessarily think that their offense coordinator is going to run the ball 30 times, or just 25 times. I think they run the ball enough to make the play action effective.
Okay.
That's what I think. I think they run the ball enough just so but last week when the game is tight against the Bucs to throw it 44 times, there was no need. I agree.
Yeah.
What was
anyway,
along with agreeing with Jason, what was your point that had nothing to do with what we were talking about?
Well, I was just thinking, as you kept talking about the linebacker position, if by chance it were to come to that, I think Nolan Smith can play stack backer because he did play snaps of stack backer at Georgia. And if it got to the point where there's an injury or whatever the reason, I think he can play stack backer because I've seen him play stack backer.
Yes. So also to your point, Greg, throughout the preseason and in OTAs, I believe as well, Patrick Johnson is somebody that they worked out as in fact, in the final preseason game, he played a decent amount of snaps as a off-ball
because
linebacker.
he was an edge player at Tulane, and he's basically been an edge player. But, I think they know they have to cross-train some guys now because you just don't know about Nakobe Dean. Unfortunately, it's, he keeps hurting his feet, and you can't play sports if your feet are bad, so we'll see how that plays out.
That's true, by the way.
True.
What did you guys observe? We'll wrap it up with this. Jay, what did you observe in general about the back end of Sean Desai's defense? We always talk about post-snap, pre-snap, movement, disguise. What did you observe? Because obviously he had a lot of new parts there that he was working with.
I think most of his stuff was up front. It wasn't necessarily in the back end.
Right.
So, and I just think that the tree, that Seattle tree, has never been a big disguise of defensive coaches, and what Pete Carroll kind of tends to like. It's never been a bunch of disguising on the back end. It's about what happens up front. And so I don't think that it'll be a tough job for Kirk Cousins to discern what's going on, to see what's going on. I don't think it'll be a tough job. Now, the toughest job will be, can our defensive line dominate theirs, which will cause Kirk Cousins to throw the ball to us. And I just think that's a very high chance that can happen.
Right.
Well, this is what this is their philosophy, right? We know we're not going to pay linebackers. We know we're not going to pay safeties. We know occasionally our secondary may not match up against New England's or somebody else's, but we are a front four team. We're an offensive line, defensive line team, and that has been a successful recipe for them for the most part over the last few years. It is time to wrap this thing up, to get into do what we best. We'll go through our players of the game. We'll go through our score predictions. First, I want to remind everybody to check out our friends at phlsportsnation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at phlsportsnation.com and on Twitter at phlsportsnation. All right, let's get into our players to watch, players of the game. Now, the trick isn't to name them, it's to remember who you guys picked. Okay, although this is a short turnaround game, so no excuses.
Yeah.
Hope you guys all remember. Jason, I start with you. Who's the player of the game tonight for the Eagles?
Oh, I'm going to go with Jalen Carter. Austin Schottman, against Jalen Carter, I'll take Jalen Carter. And so that's what I'm thinking.
I'm thinking that Kevin O'Connell was not sleeping well last night, thinking about no Garrett Bradbury against Jalen Carter. I would agree with you on that. Greg, who's your player of the game tonight?
I'm going to go with a bounce back because, we love his demeanor. We love the way he lives the game and thinks the game. I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. And, again, probably going to have some better opportunities tonight, maybe some good one-on-one matchups against that Vikings secondary, especially if Ryan Flores decides he needs to turn up the pressure and blitz a little bit. So
he just strikes me as the kind of kid, and Jay, you would know better, that has been pissed off at himself for the last 3 days and can't wait to play the game tonight.
That's the kid he is. That's the young man that you have. That's him 100%.
Yeah, hey, was Donovan like that at all? And just curious. He seemed more
plead the fifth.
Oh my gosh!
Hey, listen.
I think everybody's competitive.
Yeah, everybody handles things differently.
That was just funny because that was a Dave Chappelle line.
Right.
Yeah, so that was it. So, but I definitely believe that Donovan had that competitive edge too. You can't get to the level of Pro Bowls and Super Bowls without having some competitive edge. I just think that is different. I just think that Jalen Hurts is more mature for the age than Donovan was.
Yeah, that's fair. And then, by the way, some people just handle things like some people wash it off. I know the cornerbacks always said, if you had a bad game, if you have a bad play, you can't be carrying that with you. You can't beat yourself up because the nature of the position at corner is that you have to be ready for the next play every single time. So you can't be that type of person that beats yourself down if you get beat, because every cornerback gets beat.
Yeah, it's the same. Jalen is a serial overachiever, and he wants to do well, and that's just the mindset of the guy that has always been doubted, always been maligned. He wants to do well, so I'm pretty sure he's the guy that can.
He's a serious young man.
He definitely is.
Yeah.
Adam, your player of the game is
Numero 1. Jalen Hurts.
Hurts.
Yeah, I'm expecting a big bounce back. In fact, I think Brian Johnson will bounce back. He now has one game under his belt. We talked to D. Filippo about that today, what it's like to coach, your first game as an offense coordinator in the National Football League. So they're all going to bounce back. They're going to be very aggressive tonight. I expect that. And then, of course, I wanted to pick Jalen Carter. I actually thought of it. It's his first game as an Eagle here in Philly, but I just feel like it's going to be a Hurts game tonight. After last week, it's going to be a coach's game too, because the thing is, defensively, guys, they got some challenges tonight. I'm really, there's a lot of subplots, a little bit more than I expected for this game.
Yeah, no, there are quite a bit. Listen, I picked Devontae Smith. My feeling was, if Flores tries to throw a lot of cover zeros and blitzes and does some crazy stuff, then AJ Brown maybe has the bigger game. But Devontae Smith, I still think this year is going to be just another huge step up. You saw him make some nice catches last week, and I get the feeling he's going to get a lot of opportunities. I was almost tempted to pick Dallas Goedert for what we talked about earlier.
Sure.
The whole idea of we got to get this guy the ball after just no catches last year. But in the end, I settled on Devontae Smith. Now, I mentioned the Eagles are 7-point favorites, over under of 49. Everybody is 1-0. Congratulations, everybody. We're all 1-0 in our picks so far. Let's get into him and see if we
I was 1
2-0.
point off of the score too, just to let you guys know.
Oh, did you have a 24-20 last week?
I have a 24-20.
Nice call.
Wow. Me and Adam were close until that last touchdown. Then took it out. Jason, go to 2-0. Who wins tonight?
I got the Birds. I may sound negative. I was just calling out what I seen on tape, but I believe that the Eagles will win pretty impressively tonight, 30-17.
30-17. All right, a little bit under, but obviously they cover there. Greg, what do you see tonight?
I have the Birds 27-17.
Birds 27-17. That would be 44 points. So a little bit under, but also a cover. Adam, what do you got?
I got it. Eagles 27, Vikings 20. It certainly is going to be, I see it between 47 and 50. I know the over-under is 49.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that I have is for the Vikings to get this done, they got to be able to protect. I know Darisaw is going to play, but he's also playing with an injury.
Right.
The center's out. This does worry me with the way the Eagles defensive line played. And by the way, one thing we should add is there a deeper defensive tackle group than the Eagles have? They're so deep at that position.
No, it makes you wonder why they had 6 active for the game last week.
Yeah, it's true. It's another question. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, I'm with you. I think we're all close in score here. I have the Eagles 27, the Vikings 24. Earlier in the week, I had it a little bit more lopsided in favor of the Eagles, but I am a little bit worried about the injuries that came out with Gainwell and Reed Blankenship. So I do think the Vikings will be able to move the ball a little bit better than expected. I want to thank everybody involved, everybody for watching. Ocean Casino Resort, Sky Motor Cars, PHL Sports Nation, James and Zach. Thanks to our panel here. Thanks everybody for joining. Remember, there's going to be post-game coverage. It's the Inside the Birds post-game live with myself and Clay Harbor, no later than 10 minutes after the game on insidethebirds.com. Andrew DeCecco, he's at the stadium right now to cover the team for the website, so make sure you're checking it out there. And for Jason Avant, Greg Cosell, and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching Inside the Birds pregame live.